Ladies and gentlemen, we are staring directly at an undeniable crisis of recognition and respect within USA Basketball that threatens to undermine the most popular athlete in women's sports. USA Basketball just released their official marketing materials, announcing the roster for the 2028 Women's World Cup qualifying team. And the image they chose to represent American women's basketball does not feature Caitlin Clark. Instead, the promotional graphic prominently displays Rhyne Howard, Aaliyah Boston, and Chelsea Gray, while completely omitting the player who single-handedly transformed the entire landscape of women's basketball and brought millions of new fans to the sport. This is not an oversight. This is a deliberate choice that exposes the continued resistance within the basketball establishment to fully embrace the reality that Caitlin Clark is the biggest star in women's sports, not just women's basketball, and that her presence is the primary reason USA Basketball and the WNBA are negotiating record-breaking media deals and collective bargaining agreements right now. Make sure you hit that subscribe button immediately, because this story reveals the deep institutional dysfunction within USA Basketball and the WNBA that refuses to market their most valuable asset. And you need to understand how this impacts everything from starting lineups to playing time to the future of women's basketball. The marketing failure is so glaring that fans immediately flooded social media with confusion and outrage. How does USA Basketball announce a roster that includes Caitlin Clark and then produce promotional materials that do not feature her image? The graphic shows three players who, while talented and deserving of roster spots, do not move the cultural needle remotely close to what Clark does every single time she steps on the court. Rhyne Howard is an excellent player who won a bronze medal in 3-on-3 basketball at the Paris Olympics. Aaliyah Boston is a former College Player of the Year and a dominant interior presence. Chelsea Gray is a veteran champion with multiple rings. None of them generate the ratings, the attendance, the merchandise sales, or the mainstream media coverage that Caitlin Clark produces simply by existing. This is not subjective opinion. This is measurable fact supported by television ratings, ticket sales data, social media engagement metrics, and every other quantifiable measure of popularity and cultural impact. When Caitlin Clark plays, people watch. When she is on a roster, tickets sell out. When her jersey is available, it becomes the top seller. When her games are broadcast, networks see ratings increases that dwarf anything else in women's basketball history. She is the Michael Jordan of this era of women's sports, the singular, transcendent talent whose appeal crosses demographic boundaries and brings casual sports fans into a world they previously ignored. Yet USA Basketball chose to promote their World Cup qualifying roster with an image that does not include her. The decision is so baffling that it can only be explained by one of two possibilities. Either the people responsible for marketing USA Basketball are incompetent beyond comprehension, or there is an institutional resistance to fully embracing Caitlin Clark as the face of American women's basketball. Given the track record of decisions made by USA Basketball leadership over the past year, the latter explanation seems far more plausible than the former. Remember that this is the same organization that left Caitlin Clark off the Olympic roster despite her being the most popular player in the sport and coming off a college career that generated unprecedented attention for women's basketball. The justifications offered at the time ranged from roster chemistry to veteran experience to the need for defensive versatility. None of those explanations held water when you considered that Clark's offensive brilliance and playmaking ability would have made the team better on the court, while also generating exponentially more public interest in the Olympics. The decision to exclude her was widely criticized, and many observers believed it was driven by personal agendas within the selection committee rather than pure basketball merit. Now we see the same pattern repeating itself with marketing materials that exclude Clark from the promotional image for a tournament she is actually participating in. The message being sent is clear. USA Basketball does not want Caitlin Clark to be the face of their program, even though she objectively is the face of women's basketball in America and increasingly around the world. They would prefer to promote players who fit a certain mold, who came up through the traditional pipeline, who have the approval of the old guard, and who do not threaten the existing power structures that have controlled women's basketball for decades. This resistance is not limited to USA Basketball. The WNBA has demonstrated the same reluctance to fully embrace Caitlin Clark as the centerpiece of their marketing strategy. Despite the fact that her rookie season generated record television ratings, sold out arenas across the country, and brought millions of new fans to the league, the WNBA has been hesitant to build their entire promotional infrastructure around her. They continue to spread marketing resources across multiple players in an attempt to avoid appearing too dependent on one individual, even though that individual is the reason their media rights deal just increased by over $20 million. The institutional jealousy and pettiness is palpable. Longtime WNBA players and alumni resent the attention Caitlin Clark receives. They dismiss new fans as bandwagon supporters who do not truly understand or appreciate the game. They view Clark's popularity as unearned or inflated by media hype, rather than recognizing that she earned every bit of attention through transcendent talent and performance. This resentment bleeds into decision-making at every level of the sport, from how players are marketed to how playing time is distributed, to how disciplinary decisions are made when Clark is fouled hard by opponents who clearly target her with physical play. The contrast with how FIBA markets the same tournament is striking and revealing. FIBA, the International Basketball Federation, released their own promotional materials for the World Cup qualifying tournament, and Caitlin Clark is prominently featured. They understand that her presence is what will drive global interest in the event. They recognize that basketball fans around the world want to see her play, and they are smart enough to use her image to maximize attention and viewership. FIBA does not have the same institutional baggage that USA Basketball carries. They are not influenced by the old guard of American women's basketball who feel threatened by Clark's popularity. They simply see a star athlete who can help grow their sport, and they market accordingly. After significant backlash on social media, USA Basketball did release a second promotional graphic that includes Caitlin Clark, but even that image is problematic. Clark is positioned in the background, while Angel Reese is featured more prominently in the foreground. Now, Reese is an excellent player and deserves recognition for her rebounding prowess and her role in generating interest in women's basketball. But she is not on Caitlin Clark's level in terms of popularity, cultural impact, or importance to the growth of the sport. The decision to feature Reese more prominently than Clark in the revised graphic suggests that even when USA Basketball attempts to course correct, they still cannot bring themselves to fully embrace the reality of who their biggest star actually is. If USA Basketball were making marketing decisions based purely on who generates the most interest and brings the most value to the brand, Caitlin Clark would be the focal point of every single piece of promotional material. Her image would be larger than anyone else's. Her name would be featured first. The entire campaign would be built around the fact that the best player in women's basketball is representing the United States. That is how you maximize attention, viewership, and cultural relevance. But that is not what is happening because the people making these decisions are not prioritizing what is best for the growth of the sport. They are protecting egos, maintaining old power structures, and resisting change. This dynamic creates legitimate concern about how Caitlin Clark will be utilized during the actual tournament. Making the roster is one thing, getting meaningful playing time and a starting position is something else entirely. There is a realistic scenario where Clark makes the team but plays limited minutes because the coaching staff and selection committee prioritize veterans with international experience over the player who gives them the best chance to win and generates the most public interest. Fans who tune in expecting to see Clark dominate could instead watch her sit on the bench for extended stretches, while older, less dynamic players get the majority of minutes. The Yukon Mafia, as some observers call the network of former Connecticut players and coaches who hold influential positions throughout women's basketball, wields enormous power within USA Basketball. Sue Bird, the former Yukon star and longtime national team point guard, now serves as managing director of the women's national team. She has direct influence over roster selection and playing time decisions. Paige Bueckers, the current Yukon star, is also on the World Cup qualifying roster and has been mentioned by Yukon coach Gino Auriemma as a potential starting point guard. The concern is that institutional bias toward Yukon products could result in Bueckers starting over Clark, despite Clark being the superior player and bigger star. None of this is to diminish Paige Bueckers as a player. She is exceptionally talented and will have a successful professional career. But Caitlin Clark is on a different level. She is a generational talent whose combination of shooting range, playmaking vision, and competitive fire makes her the best point guard in women's basketball. Any decision to start Bueckers over Clark would be indefensible from a pure basketball standpoint, which means if it happens, it would have to be motivated by factors other than winning games. The same institutional dynamics that left Clark off the Olympic roster are still in place. Dawn Staley, the South Carolina coach and former national team player, remains involved in USA basketball circles and has influence over program decisions. Cheryl Reeve, who coached the Olympic team, is still part of the national team infrastructure. These individuals were part of the leadership group that made the decision to exclude Clark from the Olympics, and there is no indication that their perspective on her has changed. If anything, the resentment may have intensified now that Clark's rookie WNBA season proved all of her supporters correct about her ability to perform at the highest level and her value in growing the sport. What makes this situation even more frustrating is that we are watching USA Basketball repeat the same mistakes that nearly cost them dearly during the Olympics. The team struggled at times during the tournament, and there were games where an elite playmaker and shooter like Caitlin Clark could have made a significant difference. They won the gold medal, but the margin was closer than it should have been, given the talent disparity between the United States and other countries. Adding Clark to that roster would have made the team better on the court, while also generating far more interest in the Olympics among American sports fans who otherwise do not pay attention to women's basketball. The WNBA faces a similar reckoning. The league just experienced its most successful season in history almost entirely because of Caitlin Clark, yet the institutional response has been lukewarm at best. Players and coaches continue to complain about new fans not respecting the history of the league or understanding the nuances of the game. They resent that Clark gets more attention than players who have been in the league longer and won more championships. This mindset is self-destructive and economically irrational. Every business in the world would kill to have a product or personality that generates the kind of attention and revenue that Caitlin Clark creates. The WNBA has that asset, and instead of maximizing it, they seem determined to downplay it out of misplaced loyalty to the old guard. The concern heading into next season is that the physical targeting of Caitlin Clark will continue, and the league will refuse to address it. Opponents regularly commit hard fouls on her that cross the line from competitive physicality into dangerous play. The league has been reluctant to issue suspensions or significant fines because they hide behind the excuse that women's basketball is a physical game and players need to toughen up. This double standard is absurd. If Caitlin Clark were committing flagrant fouls on other players with the frequency that fouls are committed on her, she would be suspended repeatedly. But because she is the one being targeted, the league looks the other way and allows it to continue. This institutional dysfunction extends from marketing decisions to officiating to playing time distribution on the national team. At every level, the people in positions of power within women's basketball are resisting the reality that Caitlin Clark is the most important player in the sport and should be treated accordingly. They would rather protect egos, maintain outdated hierarchies, and cling to the way things have always been done, instead of adapting to the new reality that a generational superstar has arrived and changed everything. USA Basketball and the WNBA have a choice. They can continue down this path of resistance, resentment, and institutional bias that prioritizes protecting the old guard over maximizing the potential of their sport. Or they can embrace reality, put Caitlin Clark at the center of everything they do, and ride the wave of popularity she generates to unprecedented growth and success. The smart move is obvious. Whether the people in charge are capable of making it remains to be seen. But every decision like this marketing failure chips away at credibility and reinforces the perception that women's basketball leadership is more interested in politics than winning.